Hi, John Timco with the Villages Railroad Historical Society and Scale Division. Today I'm going to show you how to scratch build this HO scale Cape Cod style house using the Evans Design Model Builder software along with common scratch building materials. The program will be broken down into 4 segments: material and tools, software, layout design, and construction. So let's get started. Let's start off by looking at some of the materials that we need to build these structures. For backing, I like to use 1/16 inch basswood. For the layout design and cutting out of the windows and doors, I like to use the Evergreen Scale Models sheet styrene in a .020 or 20 thousandths thickness. For all the trim work, I use the Evergreen Scale Models strip styrene, and for this exercise in HO house, I've decided to use .020 by .040 or 20 thousandths by 40 thousandths strip styrene for the window trim, and .020 by .060 and .080 or 20 thousandths by 60 thousandths and 20 thousandths by 80 thousandths for trim on the house itself, up around the peak and the corners. To glue the paper to the styrene, I use 3M Super 77 multi-purpose spray adhesive. To assemble the wall sections, I'll use a good quality wood glue. To glue on the trim work, I use a CA adhesive with a 20-second set time. This gives you the ability to make final adjustments prior to the glue actually setting up. To protect the printed building papers from water damage, I use Tester's Dull Coat. Now let's take a look at some of the tools you'll be using. Okay, first off, you'll need a good quality scale rule. This one here from General has HOONN scale on it, and it's a good substantial ruler. A straight edge for cutting paper, cutting the basswood backing and the styrene. A quality knife with extra blades. I like a thin knife. It's easier to handle. It's more like a pencil. And it takes the number 11 X-Acto blades, and make sure that you have spares. A sanding block with fine paper, somewhere in the area of a 150 grit. A square for marking and cutting. This is a thin beam square, and it allows you to put it on your work, and the beam is thin enough that it'll allow the work surface to come up right on the angle there, and it just lays flat on your work surface. These squares are available for micro mark, and assorted weights and maybe another square for assembly, and we'll get into that. You'll see how that all works out later on in the program. And the key to everything is the Model Builder software by Evans Design. It's available online. Just key in www.modeltrainsoftware.com. This is a Windows-based program. I don't know if it's available for Mac. When you start the program, this is the first screen you'll see. This screen is where you designate the scale that you're going to be working in, and I have all the scales listed here. And we're going to be doing 1 to 87 HO scale. So we click on 1 to 87 and then enter, and it brings you to the work screen. Now the work screen has a lot of information on it. This is where you do all your decision making. Up in this area here, this is the material dimensions area. These two boxes here tell you where on the sheet your project is, what the item that you're working on. This two boxes here tells you the height and width. Now before we get started, there's one thing that we have to do. This box here, we'll click on that. This then will adjust the scale on the side to what dimensions you're looking for. I always work in English feet actual. So you click on that and you can see how the scale has changed. This here is your material designer's block. This will bring you to the brick, where you can customize your brickwork. You can make your mortar lines thicker or thinner. You can actually designate the color of the brick you want and what kind of brick. This one here, siding, will give you clapboard siding or vinyl style siding in all of these different colors. And this here will designate the height of the exposure to the weather, and these buttons will give you how much shading, and we're going to get into that because we're going to be doing a frame house. These three boxes here designate the type of materials that you're going to be working with. This first one here, the material box, click on the down arrow and it gives you all of the different materials, basic materials that you're going to be using. Siding, these are all the sidings along here. If you go into metal, it'll give you metal sidings. If you go into bricks, it'll give you other brick, which is pretty much just a pat brick. The only thing you can do with this is stretch it and shrink it to the size you want. Over here in this section is your windows and doors. So let's click on factory windows and it gives you an assortment of factory windows. Miscellaneous windows. Residential windows. This I use a lot. Residential doors. You can see that the patterns are somewhat limited, but once you learn how to work the program, you can get around a lot of the shortcomings. And garage doors. Now this other column gives you different types of trim, lattice and grills. This is what I use most in this category. So then let's go back to the siding, because that's going to be the basis of everything. And we'll click on the siding, and let's go with this dark green. Now this is a preview screen here, and this is where you adjust your height of the exposure to the weather. That's 3.5, that's 4 inches. Here you click on heavy shading, medium shading, light shading. So I like the medium shading with 4-inch height, 4 inches to the weather. And you click print full sheet and it'll bring up your print dialog box, and you just click print and it'll print out that sheet of paper. Now let's go to windows and doors, because that is an important feature. Now I'm going to take this window here, and all you do is click on it and you drag the arrow and it'll put the window on the palette. Now, I usually like to position it in the upper left-hand corner, and the easiest way to do that is go to the object dimensions, the top box. Just click on it so it highlights blue, type in a 0, and hit enter. And then do the same thing with the left. Click on it, 0, and it brings it all the way over to the side. Now, if you look at your scale, you'll see that this window actually measures a little over 5 feet in width and about 4.5 feet in height. And you can see that very easily because on your dimensions, your width and your height dimensions, it gives you exactly how big this window is. It's 5.3 feet wide and 4.4 feet high. I like to work with stock sizes. 3x5 windows. If I'm doing a window, a bathroom window, or a window over a sink in the kitchen, I'll use 2.5 by 4. Double windows like this, I'll make 6 by 5 feet high, 6 feet wide. And we can do that, we can change it to a single window by clicking this button up here, the crop button. Now notice these blocks change from black to white. So now we're in the crop mode. And I'll just click on this box here and just move this down until I get the picture of the window that I want. The height is okay, so we don't have to worry about that. Now we go back to the stretch. And this is where we make it the size that we're looking for. 3.2 wide, 5.2 high. I give it an extra 2/10. This way, when I go to mount the window in the structure, if the structure hole is just a hair oversized, you won't see the white paper. You'll see the gray, what you're supposed to see. So now we have that window size, but we need a lot of them. So what you do is go onto it with the pointer, right click, click duplicate. And that'll give us the opportunity to copy that window exactly for as many as we need. Now, I've already copied out a sheet of windows, so I'm just going to show you how we'll do the reducing it to the size that we need for a kitchen or a bathroom. So we're still in a stretch mode, so we'll take it and shrink it down to 2.7 because 2.5 feet is the width I want, and then we'll shrink the height to 4.2 because I said that a 2.5 by 4 window is what I would be looking for. And we'll duplicate that, and that's our windows. Now let's go to the doors. So we go to this drop down, residential doors, and here's our palette. Now once again, they don't give us a very big variety, but I was going to use this one for a front door. And this one for a side door. Now the doors, I like to use 3x7 as the size, so we'll make the door 3.2 by 7.2, and the same thing with this one. 3.2 by 7.2. So now all you have to do is go up to File, Print, and hit the print button, and you'll get all your windows and doors. What I usually do is I make a full sheet of nothing but windows, not necessarily the same style, but a good number of each style, and I do the same with doors. This way I have a supply of windows and doors to work from. And I'll show you an easier way to adjust the size of anything that you have on the palette. If you want to increase the size of this window like we've been doing, you click on it, you go into the stretch, and then instead of stretching it manually like this, just go up here, click on the width box, and it'll turn blue. And we said that we want 3.2, so you type in 3.2, enter, and then the height, click on that, so that's highlighted, and click on and type in 5.2, enter. That is an easier way to do it. Now if you decide that you want to save any project that you're working on, you simply go up to the file here, come down to Save As. In this line you give it a name, and it'll permanently save it to your computer. This way, in case you decide that you want to use these windows and doors again, or whatever project you're working on, all you have to do is open the existing file. You don't have to recreate it. Also, you can print anything that you're working on. Just hit File, Print. It'll bring up the print dialog box, and hit the print button, and it'll save it. It'll send it directly to your printer. Now if you'll notice, I don't push the windows too close together on the worksheet. The reason for that is when I cut these out to place them in the building, I'm going to be cutting it down the center here and across here. I want to leave some area around the windows and the doors for gluing purposes, because you're going to be mounting these from the inside of the structure, and we'll see that when we get to that point. Okay, now let's go after some roofing. Now, whether or not this is saved, it doesn't matter. If you want to clean your sheet off, just go up to here, File, New Design, and if it hasn't been saved, it'll ask you if you want to. If it has been saved, it'll just wipe it out and give you a new worksheet here. Let's go into siding. And we said that we'd use the green, and we want to bring the siding into the design screen. This is the design screen. Now we already said that we're going to keep it at 4 inches to the weather and a medium shading. So you click this box, bring siding to the design screen, and there it is. Now if you want to save it, just do the same thing. File, Save As, give it a name, save it, and you'll have this that you can bring up at any time. It's really nice if you change the configuration of anything, that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. If you want to use it again, you save it and you have it. So now we have our siding printed out. There's one other item I'd like to show you on this toolbar here, Layout, Screen Zoom. This allows you to change the length of the ruler or shorten it. I like to work at 100%. If you put it up to 150, you could see where it really expands the ruler out. It's nice if you're working in something that's really critical, that you get the sizing just right. But I like to work at 100 because I can see my whole project on the screen. You can see it doesn't extend past the screen. So 100% I find is the best to work with unless I really have to do some critical cutting. If you want to be able to configure the sizes of siding, you're going to have to come to materials, siding, pick something that you're going to work with, say that one there. Now this here, this you can work with. You cannot work with anything taken from the siding palette. Now I've gotten so used to working with brick from this materials list that I prefer to do that, because I can do whatever I want with this. I can print out full sheets. I can expand it to whatever I want. I can mix more than one brick pattern on a sheet. So it's much more versatile. Okay, this is going to be a 24 by 30 Cape Cod style house. And normally we try and lay out all 4 walls in one line. But we're not able to do that because the styrene isn't long enough, so we'll have to do the 2 walls, 2 straight walls, and then the 2 other walls. The opposite walls will be the peaks. So I've marked this at the 30-foot and 60-foot spots, and we'll take a square and draw the height. And usually I make 11-foot high exterior walls. Now I'll go ahead and mark 7-foot height, and then a line below it at 5 feet. And I'll do that on both sides. And I'll go ahead and I'll connect those 2 marks. Those represent the areas where the windows are going to go into. And we can start laying in the windows. And they're going to be 3 feet wide. And we'll have 2 windows in each panel. So if we do 5 in from the edge plus 3, and then 5 in from this edge plus 3, 5 in from this edge plus 3, and 5 in from this edge plus 3. And we'll take the square and connect those lines down . These should all be 3 by 5 openings then for the windows. Now in this wall here we'll go ahead and we'll put the door, and I want the door centered So it's 30 feet long. I'll mark a line at 15, and then a 1.5 feet on either side because it's going to be a 3-foot doorway. And just to play it safe, I'm going to put an X in the panels that get cut out. Now it helps to have a good straight edge for cutting and a sharp blade. And I use a number 11 X-Acto. It's easier for me to handle. I find it more comfortable. And on the back side of my straight edge, I cemented a piece of fine sandpaper. I put a spray adhesive on the ruler and then put it onto the sandpaper and then cut the ruler out, because I found that a steel rule will slide easily on the styrene, but if you back it with sandpaper, it helps to give it some grit. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to cut out the openings. Now I always put the area that's going to remain underneath the straight edge. And I'll extend the cut a little past the line and make 2 to 3 passes so I know that I'm through the styrene. I have these blocks here. It helps the camera to focus, because working on a sheet with no contrast, the camera goes out of focus and starts to drift. Once again, I extend the cut a little past the line so I know that when I do the joining cuts that I won't leave any material or very little behind. So all the pieces should just fall out. You shouldn't have to do any trimming. But if you find that a piece is hanging up in the corner, just take your knife and block that out, because these edges have to be very sharp. We can now go ahead and cut out the walls themselves. Okay, we now have the front and back walls of the house cut out. Before we do anything else, we're going to cut the backings for these walls, and we're going to dedicate them to each other, to the pieces that we cut out next to backings. Now, to cut the backings, I like to use 1/16 basswood. Basswood is a little more substantial and balsa. It doesn't warp quite as easily. And I'll take these steel blocks and I'll make sure that the wall section is perfectly aligned with the edges of the wood. And then I'll go ahead and make the cuts. Now you want to make sure that you hold the blade perpendicular at a true 90-degree angle. Otherwise your cut will not come out square. Now this becomes a mated wall section, and if you look, you can see that these edges are perfectly square. And we're going to go ahead and mark them with a 1, so that when we put this together, are going to look at each other. So you have to mark it on the inside of the wall section. So when we glue it, it's going to go like this. This wall will be done next, and we're going to mark that too. So when I cut this, this will be marked too, and it'll be dedicated to this wall section. Okay, I went ahead and I cut this other wall, and I could see that it's not perfectly in line. Never sand like this. You will invariably dig deeper going one way. Just take it and rake it like this a couple of times. You don't need much. And also, I would suggest, after you cut, you'll feel a burr. Just go with the sanding block like this, and you'll remove the burr. The front and back walls are now ready. Use the same method to do the two end walls. But since there's going to be a peak, I'll run through that with you. Okay, let's lay out the end walls. Now we said that it's going to be 25 by 30. So let's make a mark at the 25 and at the 50. Take our square, and we're going to go higher than we need to for the wall because we have to figure the peak. So once again, let's mark the 11 feet. And connect the lines. Now we're going to do what they call a 6/12 pitch which means 6-foot rise and a 12-foot run. Now, since these are 25-foot walls, we'll go at 12.5 and make a mark. 12.5 and make a mark. We'll take our square and we'll draw a line up here. That represents where our peak will be. And then from this point, we'll make a mark at 6 feet. So this is a 6-foot rise and a 12-foot run. And then we'll just go ahead and connect our marks. And that lays out the two end walls. Just follow the same method that we did. So I marked in a doorway here and I put a bathroom over here. This is a small bedroom, and this is a larger bedroom and a living room. The doorway goes into the kitchen. So I'm going to go ahead and cut these out and get them ready. Okay, let's do the final wall now. Once again, we'll make sure that the styrene is flush up against the edges of the wood. We'll go ahead and mark the mating surfaces. And then we'll check to make sure that these edges are perfectly square, and it doesn't hurt to just dress them up a little. And that's it. The 4 walls are prepared. The next step is to get the siding on the styrene. Now, these steel blocks that I've been using actually are part of a square that I get from Micromark. It's a 3-inch adjustable square, and I just take and remove the ruler part, and I use the blocks. And we're going to see as we go along, when we start to assemble the building, how much use I get out of these. Now, before we go any further, let's talk about material. What I use to do the walls is 20,000 sheet styrene, and it's available up in Rob's Hobbies, and it's from Evergreen Scale Models. And it comes in a package, and it's 3 sheets per package, and it'll cost you a little under $5. Now, when we get to putting the siding on and trim work, I use the strip styrene in various thicknesses and widths. And scale, I'll usually use a 10 or 15 thousandths strip styrene, 15 thousandths thickness, and about 20 to 30 thousandths, 35 to 40 thousandths in width. For HO, you might want to consider using a 20 thousandths thickness, and it comes in all different widths depending on whether you're going to be doing trim work around windows or structural trim on the corners of the building. Okay, we have our siding, sheet of siding, and it's a good idea to trim off the margins because you're going to be working with this upside down, and you want to make sure that when you put a wall section down on the paper that you don't accidentally put it down over the margin. So we'll get rid of this, all the two sides and the top and the bottom, and then we'll be ready to glue our first wall section. Okay, getting ready to put the siding on. I use Scotch Super 77 spray adhesive. This is an excellent product, but you have to be careful in that the overspray, once it starts getting onto other things, it's very difficult to get off. The only thing I've found that is really good to get it off is straight acetone. So you need to be careful. We'll just take the cap off and shake it up. And then we'll do a test spray just to make sure that we have a nice fan spray. And we'll give it 2 light shots. Get rid of that cardboard. And once again, you're going to be working upside down. So you want to make sure that you align your bottom, because that's the most critical part, is the alignment of the bottom. Once you get that aligned, just press it down and it's there. Now you want to make sure that you don't put too much adhesive on, because if you do, what'll happen is it'll create bubbles, because you're going to have clumps of glue that aren't going to adhere properly. So that's our first wall section. Now you can go ahead and do the second wall section, and we can fit the two on the one sheet. And I'll get my cardboard again. Now you want to make sure that the side that you spray is the side with all your markings. That is actually the outside. Don't go right to the edge of the paper. You need to leave a little paper overhanging, because we're going to be doing a lap joint, and on some surfaces you're going to cut this flush, others you're going to cut it down the center, because depending on how you overlap your joints, one side has to be longer to hide the edge of the wood. Let's go ahead and cut out the wall now. And where you run down the peak, when you get to the edge of the wall, always go horizontal, because this way you won't have any embarrassing gaps when you assemble the building. Okay, and there's the first wall. Now what we need to do is cut out for the windows and the doors. Depending on the type of building you're making, whether it be a brick building or a frame construction, you're going to use two different ways of cutting out the openings. If you do a brick building, on the edge of the opening, the door or window opening, when you go to put your windows in, you're going to wind up with the edge of the plastic showing. So to alleviate that, you cut the paper flush across the top, down the center, and then to the corners. This will allow you to fold it in and glue it so that when you put the windows in, you will see brick along the edge. But since we're doing a frame construction and we're going to have trim work, that's not necessary. So here we can go ahead and cut out the whole opening. And we're going to be doing white trim, so we don't have to worry about what we see on the edge. Now, if we were doing a colored trim, I would suggest painting the edge along here on the two sides and on the bottom, so that when you put your painted trim, you won't see any white along the edges. Okay, our little Cape Cod style home is really starting to shape up here. All the windows and doors have been cut out of all four walls, and it's time to see just what we're going to be looking at when we do the windows and doors. And you could see how the alignment of the windows, because we've cut them just a little bit oversized, really helps us out that we don't see any of the white coming through. Now we're going to get ready to install the windows, and we'll cut directly down the center. And when you do the windows and the doors, make sure that you orient the window in the correct direction, because there is an up and a down. So that's going to go like that, and it's ready to be glued in. So what we do to install these is I just take a little bit of CA on like a micro brush. I just put a couple of spots, and then I take the wall and just go over it like that. Now you don't need much glue because you're going to be backing this up with a piece of basswood. So it doesn't take much to hold it in place. And you want to make sure that you don't get the glue too close to what's going to be showing, because then it'll wind up to be like a wet spot. Okay, and that's how it's done. We're now ready to assemble the walls. So you remember that we numbered our wall sections, and here's 2 and 2 of an end wall. And we're going to apply the Scotch 3M spray adhesive. You don't want to put it onto the styrene side, because this has the overlap of the siding. So you don't want to get that sprayed. So we'll take and we'll put that aside. And remember, we said that the numbers are going to match, okay? So This is the matching side to the exterior wall. So we'll give this a shake. Test the spray pattern. Now, because the basswood is a porous surface, I give it a little bit more glue than I would on a solid surface. Basically, you're just matching up the two wall sections. Now, since this has a peak, you want to make sure that you do the alignment so that the peaks match up. That should get the alignment on the ends of the wall. And this adhesive is slick enough that you can position the pieces as needed. That's one wall completed. Okay, we're getting ready to do the trimming of the edge of the paper. Remember, I had said that we're going to be overlapping the walls. Now, it's important that you know what side to trim off. In this situation here, where the peaked wall overlaps the straight wall, the edge of the peak wall is slightly higher than the straight wall. This will allow the roofing to come down over and cover the straight wall. If you do it the opposite way, so that the straight wall overlaps the peak wall, when the roofing comes down, it's going to hit this edge of the straight wall, and your roof will not lay flat on the wall. So this is the correct overlap. So that means that it's the peak wall that gets trimmed. So now you have that properly trimmed. Now, if you're doing a flat roof, it doesn't matter which way the overlap goes. So now we've trimmed the peak wall, and we have the overhang on the straight wall. This needs to be trimmed. So what we do is we'll take the peak wall and we'll put it up against the wood so that we have an overlap so that you can see what needs to be trimmed. I like to use a whittling blade because it's nice and long. You just go ahead and trim it. Now, when that goes together, that is already trimmed, and you wind up with a perfect corner after it's glued. Once again, take it so that the outside is facing in. And the reason I do that is if you have the outside facing out and you have the incorrect angle of the blade, you're going to cut the paper and destroy that edge. Anything that's left over, you can just color in or wait for the trim work to go on, and that'll hide it. Let's make believe for a moment that we're working on a brick building with a flat roof. Usually brick buildings with a flat roof will have a roof inset inside the building walls. And it'll have a small parapet wall going all around. Now we're getting ready to assemble the walls. This is the time to come up with how much of a parapet wall do you want to have showing. Let's say you want a foot. I like to work with 20,000 styrene for the roof. So let's go ahead and mark a little over a foot on each side. We'll go ahead. It isn't long enough. We'll go ahead and we'll connect the marks. This mark becomes your guide to install the strip wood along here, right level with that line, so that your parapet wall will be the same height all the way around the building. Now when you install the strip, don't go right to the edge, because don't forget you have an overlap. So come back a little bit on each end to allow for the overlap and for the length of the strip. Now you go ahead and you put your strips in here. Okay, now you're ready to assemble the walls. This is the front of the house, and this is the side wall. This is the kitchen. This is the kitchen door. So when we assemble, it's going to be assembled like this. So you could go ahead and lay the two down like that. Now I like to use carpenter's glue for this, and I'll go ahead and I'll put a bead right along the edge, and just a skim on the edge of the wall. You don't need much to glue the paper, and if you get it too wet, what'll happen is it'll bleed through the paper. Just check your alignment again. There's our little weights again. Scrape away the excess glue. Otherwise you're going to wind up gluing the weight to the wall. Press towards the center with this weight, and then just push this one into the other weight, and your wall should be perfectly plumb. Now it's important to check the alignment on the bottom too. Now the reason I like to use the carpenter's glue is because it sets up a lot quicker than Elmer's. So we'll need to let that set up. I'd say about 20 minutes, half hour, and you can play around with it and let it stand on its own. Okay, this wall sections, or two wall sections that I've glued, the glue is dried, and you can see now what I was talking about, the proper overlap. You can see how this line, this ridge line, comes down and actually extends over the side wall. So now when I lay the roof on, it'll just come over like it's supposed to. And if you look at the outside, you could see how all of the lines pretty well match up from one side to the other. Once again, this is going to be covered by a trim boards, and I have a nice sharp edge for the trim boards to lay on, so it shouldn't be a problem when we get to that portion. Now the next wall we're going to install is the one opposite to the one that we've done already. And I like to do the gluing so that the side that has the excess paper, lay that flat down and then put the side to it. And when you press everything down, you're making sure that the wall is going to be flush, not that the paper will be sticking up or you've pushed the paper down and now you have a ripple. So by keeping the paper tab flat on the work surface and then just placing this wall in its place, everything will come out properly. Let me get a little bit of glue. A bead on the edge here. Skim on that edge, make sure there's nothing on the paper. Put it in place, remove the excess, put your weights in place, and then push this weight to the first one. And we'll let that set. Now, if you've done everything right, when you go to put the final wall in place, it should just pretty much drop in place. You might have to spread this a little bit to get it to seat. As a matter of fact, you can put that wall in its place now. Just dry, don't glue it. And that'll keep it at the proper distance. Well, the 3 walls are now secured, and it's time to lay in the 4th wall. But we're not going to just glue it in place like this. What we'll do is, to make sure that the building is really square, we're going to glue it down like this and only glue one edge. Get our glue out, on the bead, coat the edge, we're going to glue it on the one side. We're going to get a bigger square now. And this way we can square the whole building. And we'll let that dry. Okay, this is the last seam, and we can just gently spread this apart. Get the glue in there real quick. Cement it in place, put your blocks in, and the 4 walls are finished. All 4 walls are now attached, And what we're going to do now is give the house a foundation. Now, we could have done this when we first started the construction and cut the front a little bit higher and then slid the siding a little up to allow for a foundation. But I'm choosing to do it this way, and I use 60,000.060 strip styrene, and this is 0.156 wide, and in HO scale it would be 9 inches, so it works out to be a perfect size step for the entryway. I'm going to cut them to length, glue them on, and then paint them a concrete color, as this is going to be a house on a slab. Okay, we're going to start with the trim. And the first piece that we're going to lay on is the trim board running up the side wall to the peak. Now, this board has to be cut so that it's plumb with the ridge line. And the easiest way to do that is to take and flip over lay the building down on the trim piece, cut that little piece off, and now you have the right angle to make sure that your cut here is plumb with the edge of the house. And then we'll make a mark on the other side for your glue line. Now, we're not going to have the glue run past that line. Grab our CA and our micro brush. And just run a bead on the piece. We'll take and line up everything. Then we turn it over, take our knife, trim it, flush with the wall, and there you have your first piece. Now we can go ahead and start on the other side, and we'll get this whole peak area done. Now, since you cut it, that other angle is going to match. So just go ahead with an eraser and remove that line. Make your glue line. Some CA. And here we have the ridge. Now you do the same thing, do your other ridge first. Then do your front and back walls, and we'll be ready for the corner trim. We're going to start to lay in our corners now, corner trim. And once again, we need to establish the correct angle. So we'll put our trim piece down, and we'll lay the building down onto it so that the peak is sticking up a little bit. Trim it. Draw a line for our glue line. And now we can go ahead and put the CA on. Now, because you have the roof trim in place, you can't follow the same routine. We're going to have to lay this in by eye. We'll do the other side, and then we'll work in the front and back. Okay, laying in the front trim pieces is the same thing, except you don't have to worry about the angles. Everything is going to be square now. You want to make sure that your trim piece is flush with the edge of the adjoining trim piece. There it is. Now along here, if it's not even, if the board that you just put on is a little bit overhanging, you can take your X-Acto knife and just gently scrape away the overhang if you so wish. There it is. So now you can see all the trim work on the corners are done, and the next that we have to do are the windows and the doors. Now you can see where it's important to lay in your side walls first, and you use the narrower trim. Then on the front wall, you do that last. You use a wider trim, and it'll overlap and give you a wider appearance on the side walls. And since you're using 20 thousandths thick styrene, the 20 thousandth difference in the width will give you an exact perfect match on the corners. We're going to follow the same routine for the windows as we did for the side trim. Line up the top edge of your trim with the top edge of the window opening. And we'll do our glue line. Just lay the top edge right along the top opening line. Put it straight down. Now you want to do the sides of the windows and doors first. and then come across and do the top and the bottom. Now just go ahead and trim this right in line with the bottom opening. And your first piece is in. We'll go ahead and follow the same steps for the second side. Now this is where you find out how important it is that when you do your original cutting for the window and door openings, that they are as perfect as possible, because it's going to come home to roost now when you try and bridge across, and if your opening is not square, you're going to have the trim work running at an angle. Now if you find that it is running at an angle, all you need to do is trim off the piece, the longer piece, and then you'll see how it'll all match. Go ahead and do the same routine. You can see how it's starting to shape up. Now the darkness that you're seeing on the side there is a shadow from the way the light is. And then we have this window done, and you can definitely see the difference between this one and this one. And look how you get the appearance of depth, how farther in this one looks than this one. Well, the next step in the construction of our little house is going to be to start on the roof. Now, because this is a good sized structure compared to an end scale structure, instead of using one piece of styrene and bending it and coming across, which I've done, I'm going to put in a ridge beam, and I've tapered it so it somewhat matches the pitch. We'll just take and insert it right along the ridge where it belongs. And we'll put that aside to dry. Okay, and we're going to put the building back along that ridge line, but I tape these two pieces together so they won't move around. Set the building back. I use two different thicknesses of styrene taped together so that when you push the ridge line against the thicker piece of styrene, it'll hold it in place so you can make your markings. Make a mark on the styrene here, and one on this side. That represents your back wall. Now, it's nice to have about a 2-foot overhang, so we're going to go out 2 feet here. Roughly 2 feet there. Connect those lines. That should be fairly square. Yeah. And we can now go ahead and cut out the back roof, which I've already done. And let me just back up just 1 second. Mark the styrene ridge, right, left, front, so that you know how this piece is going to go onto the building. So now we have that cut out. And here I have all my notations. And that's the way it's going to go on, just like that. Now you want to cut out the front half so that it's the same width, and you can add just a little bit to the overall height. Okay, now we need to do the front, and it has to be the same width. So you can go ahead and mark that on your styrene. If the overhang is okay on the front, then you just make it the same as this. If you need more, if the overhang is a little short, well, just add a little bit. And you can go ahead and cut out your front section. Okay, we have our two sections cut. And they're going to fit like that. Nice and even. But it's a good idea to take a little sanding block and knock off the edge along the ridge. You want these to meet as nicely as possible. It'll give the ridge line a nice crisp look. Okay, now is the time if you want to color the edge of the roof to get rid of the white. Just use a felt marker, and we do the two sides and the bottom. This is the roofing paper that we're going to be using, and this paper can be installed either this way or 180 degrees this way. Now they have other roofing papers that you could see where they have like the tar coming out underneath the tabs of the shingles. So the dripping tar would be going down. So it would either look like this or like this. And this is the incorrect way of putting it on. Okay, time to install our roofing paper. This is the ridge. This is the bottom. So we're going to keep that oriented the same way at all times. Now remember, we said this paper can be used in either direction. Now I've trimmed it so that it's right along the edge of the shingle. Because this shingle can be put up in either direction, I'm going to go ahead and do the paper on the other side. Now if we were using the other roofing paper, we would have to use the same side and work along this way with the next piece to keep the tabs on the shingles oriented in the right way. So now we got that on, and we can go ahead and trim these roof panels. Let's just put a small tab of CA right up here, and we'll install the back roof panel temporarily. And the reason we're doing this is so that we can go ahead and check the alignment on the front. Now if you're happy with the alignment, you can go ahead and glue this panel in. Okay, the roof is almost finished. We have to put on the ridge shingles now. And what I like to do is take a piece of the roofing paper, and the shingles are running this way, so you want to go 90 degrees and cut maybe one shingle wide. Now flip that over and make a mark right in the center on the back side. And take your straight edge right on that line. Lightly just score the paper. You want to be able to fold it. Take and fold that paper. You're going to make a pretty good crease. You open it up, take some straight Elmers or slightly diluted. Wet down the back side. We're going to lay that right on the ridge. Smooth it down. We're going to let that dry before we trim it. Okay, all we have to do is trim the shingle here. I like to wait until this dries, because if it's wet, sometimes it tears. There it is. It's finished, with the exception of the chimney, of course. And we'll take care of that. I'd like to get back to this foundation for a minute. Now, we had done this out of plastic, styrene. Sometimes I'll do a wood foundation and I'll cover it in the Evans paper, and I'll print out a cement block design. But before I put it down on my layout, I'll take a piece of vinyl. Now this is vinyl soffit material from the building trades. You get it in Lowe's in 12-foot lengths. And I would cut it to size and glue it to the underside of the foundation. That acts as an insulator between the paper and the landscaping, because water is not your friend when it comes to inkjet printers and inks. The ink that they use in the inkjet printers is water-based, it's water-soluble. This is a piece of roof material that was printed, and I dropped a piece of water on it. I let it set for 5 seconds and blotted it up, and you can see that it just destroys the ink. Now here is, in this circle, is a drop of water that was on it for 5 seconds, and I blotted it up and there was no damage. The difference is this piece of paper was treated with dull coat, Tester's dull coat, and that's a lacquer-based product, and if you put it on in a medium coat, it'll take and it'll make the paper water repellent. It won't make it waterproof. It'll make it water repellent. This here is a sample of what happens even with the dull coat. If the water is allowed to sit for too long, it actually absorbs into the paper and it destroys the ink. So that being said, I advise that anything you print out, anything that you're going to use on the buildings, to treat it with dull coat before you build the building. It may save a lot of heartache and grief later on. We're getting ready to finish our little Cape Cod style home, and one thing that it does need is a chimney. So I printed out some brick paper, and we're going to cut the paper so that all we have is the brick. And you can see what that looks like. Now I have a piece of balsa here, and it's 18 inches square in HO scale. And the first thing we're going to do, I have some Elmers here. I'll figure out how much you have to coat. This is a mixture 1/4 water to 3/4 Elmer. I'll give it a nice coating. And then we'll lay it down onto the paper, and we'll make sure that we have it square, with just a little bit of paper showing. And we're going to let that dry. Okay, this is dried sufficiently. Now what we want to do is trim that little bit of paper that we let overhang. So now we have a nice edge. Then we take and we roll this just once, and that'll give us a nice crease in the paper. So we can go ahead and get the glue on it. Take it and roll it. Get another roll going. Roll it. We'll wipe the excess glue off for now, because the next fold is going to be critical, because we're going to come back onto the original edge. So we'll let this dry for now. Okay, now we're going to get this final side glued. Now remember what I showed you about keeping the paper dry, and you're going to have a tendency to possibly get some glue on the front of the paper if you're not careful. And once again, we're going to let this dry before we trim it, because once the paper gets wet, it gets soft, and it makes it easier to tear when you try and cut it with the knife. Okay, the glue is dry, so we can go on. You want to make sure that you have really sharp blades for this. And just put your blade down, the tip of the blade, and just score right along the edge. And there you have the completed chimney. And you can take and just push this down, and when I'm working with brick paper, I have a terracotta pencil, colored pencil. And I'll just go along that seam gently. And it just hides the edge of the white paper. Okay, laying out the chimney. Now, a Cape Cod home, the chimney is directly in back of the front door, which is directly in the center of the building. Now, the normal restrictions on chimneys, height, it has to be a minimum of 3 feet higher than anything within a 10-foot radius. So if we're going to put the chimney, say, in this line here, we'll take and put the chimney on the side. We'll get it nice and plumb. Hold it there. Check the measurement. We have 6 feet above the ridge line, so that's okay. Turn it over. Make your mark. And that's where we cut the chimney to make sure that it's plumb. Now I'm cutting this with an X-Acto knife on the line, just making rocking motions back and forth and checking to make sure that I'm not running off the angle. And there's the chimney. Now it is just a hair off, so I have to take and dress that up a little, because you want the chimney to sit flush on the roof. And it's going to go right back there. Now before we glue it in place, we need to finish off the top. We'll take some concrete cement and we'll paint it around the edge and around the top to make a nice concrete finish, and then a black square for the flue. Okay, we finished the chimney. There's the top, and I put some black around the bottom to show some flashing, tar flashing, to make sure that the roof doesn't leak. So now we're ready to put it on the house. So this is the back side, and it will go just like that. So I'm going to put some CA line it up. I'll just hold it there for a second. And there it is. I hope you found this clinic helpful and that it inspires you to try something different. Honing new skills truly makes this hobby more interesting and satisfying. Thanks for watching, and happy railroading.